I never thought I'd feel physically sick at the sound of my own last name. The lawyer's voice was calm, almost mechanical, as he read from the will. To my son, Adam Caldwell, I leave my estate in its entirety. And then he stopped. That was it. I blinked, frozen in place. My heart hammered so hard it echoed in my ears. I searched his face, waiting for him to continue. Something. Anything. My name never came. Beside me, Adam shifted slightly in his chair. I turned toward him slowly, like my body already knew what I was about to see. And there it was, the corner of his mouth curled up just a little. A smug little smirk he didn't even bother to hide. His shoulders relaxed like he'd won a game I didn't know we were playing. My throat tightened, but I couldn't look away. His eyes met mine, and I swear to God, I saw satisfaction. No grief, no confusion, just a quiet, self-satisfied confidence, like he knew this was coming. I felt cold all over. My fingers trembled as they gripped the hem of my dress beneath the table, the same dress I'd worn to our father's funeral just days ago. I had cried through that entire service. Adam barely shed a tear. He stood tall, gave the eulogy like he was accepting a promotion, but I told myself everyone grieves differently. Now I wasn't so sure. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the old wall clock behind Mr. Halberd's desk. It was counting the seconds I needed to process what had just happened, seconds I'd never get back. Why? Why wasn't I mentioned? Did he forget? Did I do something wrong? My mind spiraled. Adam finally spoke. His voice was low, feigning something like sadness. It was Dad's final wish. He told me he didn't want to split things up, thought it would just cause more problems. I turned toward him fully now, slowly, like every movement took effort. What? My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. He shrugged. Don't take it personally, Emma. He just wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. Handled properly. The words slammed into my chest like a punch. Dad and I had spoken just days before he slipped into that final coma. He'd squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't worry, Em. I've taken care of everything. You'll be all right." Those were his exact words. I knew what he meant, and yet I wasn't even in the will? I looked back at Mr. Halberd, expecting, I don't know, a mistake, a page he'd forgotten, some hint that this wasn't real. But he just cleared his throat and continued with the next legal procedure, like none of this was strange. I wanted to scream, to cry, but I couldn't move, couldn't think. I sat there, my stomach twisting in knots, heat rising up my neck, cold sweat building between my shoulder blades. And Adam? He just leaned back slightly in his chair, draped one arm over the backrest like he was settling in for a victory lap. I noticed something then, his fingers. There was a faint ink stain near the base of his thumb, the kind you get when you sign a lot of papers or forge something. My skin prickled. A sharp, sudden chill shot down my spine. No way. He wouldn't. Would he? But the thought stuck. It clawed its way into my mind and refused to leave. Something was wrong. Deep down, I knew it. And no matter how scared I was going to find out what happened. Because if Adam thought he could bury the truth with our father, he was dead wrong. The rain had started just as I stepped out of the car. Not a downpour, just a light, persistent drizzle that made the air feel colder than it really was. The sky was gray, as if the clouds couldn't decide whether to cry or hold it all in. Kind of like me. Mr. Halberd's law office sat on the corner of Elm and Wallace, tucked between a flower shop and an insurance agency. It looked more like an old library than anything else. Dark wood, iron handles on the doors, and tall windows that stared blankly out at the street. I stood in front of it for a moment, umbrella trembling slightly in my hand, wondering if walking in would change my life forever. Turns out it already had. I pushed the door open. A soft chime rang above me as I stepped inside. The scent hit me first. Old paper, leather, and something faintly minty, like the aftershave my dad used to wear. My throat tightened. I wasn't ready for that. The waiting room was quiet. A tall grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner. Everything was dark green and mahogany. No distractions, no comfort. Just polished wood, silence, and the weight of what was coming. I was the first to arrive, which didn't surprise me. I always was. Early to school, early to appointments, early to the hospital when Dad needed someone. Meanwhile, Adam had a habit of showing up when it was convenient and somehow still getting all the credit. I sat on the edge of a deep leather chair, smoothing out the wrinkles in my black dress, the same one I wore to the funeral, the same one I almost didn't take off for 3 days. I hadn't even unpacked it, just slipped it back on that morning and hoped it didn't still smell like lilies and loss. My reflection in the office mirror looked pale, hollow. My eyes were puffy, and my hair was pinned back in a rush, like I hadn't cared enough to try. I hadn't. I was just tired. So tired. The door creaked open behind me, and I didn't need to look to know it was Adam. His footsteps were light, confident. He always walked like the world was waiting for him. "Hey," he said casually, as if we were meeting for lunch. I turned my head slightly, offering the faintest nod. "Hey." He sat across from me, crossing one leg over the other. His suit was sharp, dark navy, tailored to his body like it belonged there, like he belonged in rooms like this. He looked every bit the part of the golden child, but I knew better. I'd seen him at his worst, manipulative, cold, always 2 steps ahead of everyone else and pretending it was charm. Still, I tried to quiet my anger. Dad wouldn't have wanted a fight. Mr. Halberd entered a moment later, his presence as stiff as the starch in his collar. He greeted us both with a nod and motioned us into the inner office. The room felt colder somehow. Maybe it was the heavy drapes, or maybe it was just the absence of Dad. He used to fill every room he walked into. Now there was just space. We sat. Adam to my right, Mr. Halberd behind his desk, and me, gripping the handkerchief Dad had left in his hospital drawer the last time I visited. I'd tucked it into my purse, just a piece of cloth, but it grounded me. Mr. Halberd cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and opened the folder in front of him. As per Robert Caldwell's last will and testament. I closed my eyes for a brief second, braced myself. I had no idea those next words would crack everything wide open. As per Robert Caldwell's last will and testament, Mr. Halberd began, the entirety of his estate, assets, property, business holdings, is to be transferred to his son, Adam Caldwell. That was it. I sat still, waiting, barely breathing. Waiting for the rest, for the part where he mentioned me, my name, a single word. But the silence after Adam's name stretched too long. The lawyer glanced up briefly, then down again, flipping to another page. He wasn't going to say it. He wasn't going to say me. My stomach dropped, like I was falling off the edge of something I hadn't seen coming. I blinked, hard. My ears were ringing. A faint buzzing crept into my skull like a warning siren no one else could hear. I looked at Adam, praying he'd be just as confused, that he'd shrug, shake his head, whisper something like, "That's not right." But he didn't. He just nodded slowly, like this made perfect sense. Then he said it. It was Dad's final wish. He leaned forward slightly, folding his hands on the table, his tone soft but deliberate, like a doctor delivering bad news with practiced detachment. He talked to me near the end. He didn't want things split. Said I'd know how to handle it all. I stared at him. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Handle it? What did that even mean? Adam tilted his head just enough to appear empathetic, but not too much to look guilty. His eyes flickered toward me, holding that same rehearsed warmth I'd seen at the funeral when he delivered his perfect eulogy. Not one crack. Not one real tear. My voice finally came back, though it was thin and scratchy. He told me he made sure I'd be okay, that everything was handled fairly, just a week before he... I stopped myself. Adam's smile was almost pitying. You know how Dad was. Sentimental. Maybe he just didn't want to upset you. My heart twisted because that wasn't Dad. He was fair, honest, brutal even when it came to being truthful. He would never leave something like this unexplained. Never. I looked to Mr. Halberd, hoping he'd confirm what I knew. That this wasn't right. That something was off. But he didn't even raise an eyebrow. Just kept flipping through papers. Summarizing legalities like this was just another Tuesday. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. My hands were clenched in my lap so tightly that my nails left half-moon imprints in my skin. Then I saw it. Adam's thumb. A faint black smudge on the side. It could have been nothing. printer ink, a pen, but the way he tried to keep it out of sight, it made my pulse spike. A memory surged up like a wave crashing down. The night before Dad passed, I was leaving the hospital late when I passed Adam in the hallway. He was heading toward Dad's room, looking around like he didn't want to be seen. I asked what he was doing, and he just smiled and said, "Just saying goodnight." But he was holding something then, a manila folder. And now, here we were. I couldn't say anything out loud yet, not without proof. But every bone in my body was screaming. This wasn't just grief. It was deception. Something wasn't right about the will, about Adam, about any of it. And I wasn't going to let this go. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the house or the shares or whatever else Adam had just inherited. What I did care about was the truth, because I knew my father. And this wasn't his final wish. Not even close. I barely heard the rest of the meeting. Words like estate execution, probate, and legal transfer buzzed around the room like a swarm of wasps. But they didn't land. They didn't matter. I sat still, nodding occasionally, pretending to listen, while inside, my thoughts were a storm. The moment we stepped out of Mr. Halberd's office, Adam clapped me lightly on the shoulder like we were teammates who'd just finished a game. I flinched at his touch. "I know this was a shock," he said, feigning sympathy, "but trust me, Dad knew what he was doing. I'll make sure you're okay." His words slid over me like oil, slippery, insincere. His eyes didn't match his tone. They were cold, calculating. I forced a small smile and nodded, biting down hard on the inside of my cheek so I wouldn't say what I was really thinking. Because what I wanted to say was, "You're lying. I don't know how yet, but you are." I got into my car, shut the door, and just sat there. Rain tapped against the windshield, soft and steady. My fingers gripped the steering wheel as I tried to make sense of everything. The will, the ink on his thumb, the smug confidence, and that manila folder. That folder haunted me. Something about it tugged at my memory like a loose thread. That night at the hospital, he said he was just saying goodnight. But Dad had already been unconscious by then. He hadn't spoken in over a day. So why would Adam bring a folder to a silent room? And then, like a flicker of lightning through the fog, I remembered something else. Dad's tablet. It was old and beat up, but I'd helped him set it up in his hospital room to video call me when I couldn't visit. And a few weeks earlier, after one of the nurses found him confused and disoriented, I'd installed a nanny cam app. Nothing fancy, just a way to check in remotely. He barely remembered it was on. I'd completely forgotten about it. My heart thudded once, hard like a drumbeat signaling war. I yanked my phone from my bag and opened the app, praying it was still linked. My breath caught as it connected. Footage, stored in the cloud, days' worth of silent, uneventful recordings. And then, there it was. The time and date matched the night before Dad passed. 10:42 p.m. The hospital lights dimmed. The room was still. And Adam walked in. I pressed play, hands trembling. The video played without sound, but I didn't need to hear a word to understand what I was seeing. Adam closed the door behind him, checking the hallway before locking it. He pulled something from under his coat. The folder. My stomach clenched. He approached Dad's bed, looking down at his unconscious body. His face wasn't sad. It was focused, businesslike. He pulled out a document. He placed it on Dad's chest, then gently lifted Dad's limp hand, wrapped his fingers around a pen, and began guiding it across the page. I dropped my phone. For a moment, I just sat there, eyes wide, breath shallow. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut and left gasping for air. He forged the will. He stood over our father's unconscious body and faked his final wish. Grief turned to fury. It flared hot and fast in my chest, pushing out every ounce of helplessness I'd felt all week. I picked up my phone, saved the footage, and backed it up to the cloud. Twice. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Not without witnesses. I was going to let him walk into that office, gloating and smug, thinking he'd won. And then I'd hit play. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Adam smirking over our father's unconscious body. Adam glancing at me across the table with that fake sympathy. Adam lifting Dad's hand and forcing it across that page like it was nothing. But this time, I was the one holding the power. By the next morning, I had copies of the video stored in 3 different places: my phone, a USB drive, and my email. I even texted a backup to myself just in case. If Adam thought I was going to let him bury the truth, he had no idea who he was dealing with. I arrived at Mr. Halbert's office early. Again. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, like the clouds were still waiting to pour. Inside, the office felt even colder than before. The same antique clock ticked steadily, like it had been counting down to this moment all along. Adam arrived 5 minutes late. Of course. "Morning," he said smoothly, brushing a speck of dust off his blazer like he hadn't just committed fraud a few days ago. He gave me a glance that barely registered as polite, then turned his full attention to Mr. Halbert. "Are we finalizing everything today?" he asked, already sounding like the new man of the house. I said nothing. I waited until Mr. Halbert began gathering the final paperwork, the documents that would legally transfer everything to Adam. His hand reached for a pen, and that's when I spoke. "Before you sign anything, I think you both need to see this." They turned to me. Mr. Halbert blinked, confused. Adam's smile didn't falter, but his eyes did. They narrowed just slightly, calculating, trying to read my face. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady this time. My voice was calm. "I found something. Footage from Dad's hospital room, from the night before he died." Adam laughed under his breath, quick and dismissive. "Emma, seriously? Are we really doing this?" But I was already pressing play. I held the phone up for both of them to see. The room fell silent. There was no sound in the video, just the haunting images. Adam walking into Dad's room, locking the door, pulling out the folder, lifting Dad's lifeless hand and pressing it across the signature line. Mr. Halbert leaned in, his expression shifting from polite confusion to visible alarm. His skin paled, and he straightened in his chair like he'd just been shocked. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "I set up a camera on Dad's tablet weeks ago," I said. "For safety. It recorded everything." Adam's face was bloodless now. "This is ridiculous. That could be anything. That doesn't prove anything." "It shows you forging a signature," I said, cutting him off, "while Dad was unconscious." Mr. Halbert stood up. "This changes everything. We're halting the process immediately. I'll need to bring this to the ethics board and initiate an inquiry." Adam's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked like he'd been hit. That confident posture, that rehearsed charm, gone. He tried to reach for the phone, but I pulled it back. "Don't," I said, sharp. For the first time in my life, he didn't have a comeback. The silence that followed was heavier than any I'd ever known. But this time, it didn't suffocate me. It freed me. I looked at Adam and felt nothing but clarity. He hadn't just stolen from me. He tried to erase me from our father's legacy. But Dad had always said, "Emma, the truth always finds its way out." And this time, it came through me. The investigation didn't take long. Once the video was submitted and reviewed, everything unraveled quickly. The handwriting analysis confirmed it. Dad's signature on the revised will was forged. Adam hadn't even tried to be careful. He'd rushed it, assuming no one would look closely, assuming no one would care enough to question him. But I did. The original will was located within a week. It had been filed properly with Mr. Halbert's assistant months ago, but never updated in the main file. Likely because Adam had slipped in with his forged version just days before Dad passed. Dad had split everything evenly between us. The house, the assets, the business he'd built from scratch. Fair and honest, just like the man I knew, just like he'd promised. When I saw my name in the original document, I cried. Not because of what I'd inherited, but because it proved I hadn't imagined our bond. I hadn't been wrong to trust his love. He hadn't forgotten me. He never would have. Adam was charged with attempted fraud and document tampering. His lawyer cut a deal to avoid prison, but the damage was done. He was disinherited completely, stripped of everything, and worst of all, for him, exposed. I haven't spoken to him since the hearing. He tried to call me once, left a voicemail saying it was all a misunderstanding and that Dad wouldn't have wanted us to fight. But I didn't reply, because Dad wouldn't have wanted to be betrayed either. In the weeks that followed, I moved back into our family home. It was quiet, but not empty. Every corner held a piece of Dad, his old records, his books, his perfectly labeled toolboxes in the garage. I found the letter he wrote me before the surgery, tucked between the pages of his favorite novel. Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But know this, I've always trusted you to do the right thing. You're stronger than you know. I didn't feel strong through most of this. I felt broken, then angry, then numb. But somehow, Dad saw something in me I hadn't yet, and I clung to that. I've started donating part of the inheritance to the cancer center that treated him, set up a scholarship in his name. It felt right. It felt like something he would have done. Sometimes I still replay that day in Mr. Halberd's office in my head. The moment Adam's face turned pale, the exact second the truth cut through his lies like a blade. I don't take pleasure in it, not really, but I do feel peace, justice maybe, and I think Dad would have felt that too. This experience taught me more than I ever expected, about grief, about betrayal, but most of all, about instinct. Because sometimes the truth doesn't shout, it whispers, it nags at your gut. It shows up in ink smudges, in memories that don't add up, in a feeling you just can't shake. And when that happens, don't ignore it. Even when everyone else tells you to move on, to be civil, to let it go. Listen to that voice. It might be the only thing standing between you and the truth. Thanks for listening to my story. If it made you feel something, anger, hope, or even just the need to trust your instincts a little more, like and share it. You never know who needs to hear it.